Sony has finally responded to the backlash over killing physical products, and unfortunately the answer is not going to make you feel any better. In case you've been living under a rock, Sony announced a few months ago that they plan to sunset physical disc production for all new games in January 2028. And obviously that didn't go so well. Fans immediately started criticizing this decision, and some even organized a petition asking the company to reconsider. But while all of that was happening, Sony was mostly keeping quiet. Well, until now. Sony recently published its Q1 official earnings report, and the numbers are telling us exactly why Sony is making this decision. PlayStation sold 66.1 million full game units across PS4 and PlayStation 5, and digital downloads, well, they made up 82% of those sales. And for comparison, that number was 78% in 2025. So if I was Sony, the direction of where this is going would be pretty obvious to me. I mean, it's clear as day that more people are buying games digitally and the percentage is still growing. And separately, in the Q&A section of the report, Sony addressed the physical disc decision more directly. The company once again said that the discontinuing disc production was driven, at least in part, by the ongoing digitalization of content as a whole. With all that said, Sony acknowledged that there is a lot of negative sentiment around this decision. But it said that it does not expect this backlash to affect its business model in any meaningful way. And the company plans to continue to carefully consider how best to respond to the preferences and expectations of its players. Which, I mean, is a very long and corporate way of saying that Sony doesn't really care about what you think. As long as you keep buying their games in one form or another, it plans to keep moving forward with this decision. There were also mentions of retailers, and Sony apparently has a plan for them too. Instead of selling packages containing physical discs, the company wants to introduce a model where those packages contain download codes instead. But that doesn't really solve the problem for people who care about physical ownership, or ownership in general. It gives you something that looks like a physical product, but without most of the actual benefits that came with owning a disc. And I know what some of you are probably thinking. None of it is new, right? Is it really all that Sony has to say? Unfortunately, yes. The company still has not addressed most of the biggest differences between physical and digital products. It has not introduced transferable digital licenses, it has not created an authorized resale system, has not offered any digital lending, has not provided any alternatives for many of the things that were possible when people actually owned physical products. And then there is a much bigger question of ownership. These days, companies can discontinue games, shut down services, or remove access to products whenever they want. And there is nothing you can do about it. Without these solutions, there is nothing that really protects the players from getting their games ripped from their hands, just because the publisher decided to suddenly pull the plug. So in my opinion, if Sony wants players to accept an almost entirely digital future, it also needs to explain what ownership is actually going to mean in that future. Because right now, we still don't have a satisfying answer. We just have a manufacturer that keeps dodging the question. And I mean, from a business point of view, I get why Sony is making this decision. After all, digital distribution is cheaper, it's easier to control, and better for business. And I mean, that's great, right? But for a company that constantly talks about putting its players first, Sony has a pretty funny way of showing it with decisions like this. So what do you think? Do you think Sony will ever address any of this, or it will just keep shoving the decisions down our throats? And while Sony is shrinking one part of its gaming business, Pocket Pair is moving in the opposite direction and expanding Palworld into almost everything they can. Palworld isn't just going mobile anymore. It may soon have two different mobile projects being developed by two different companies, none of which are the original developers. And that could become either a brilliant expansion or a complete branding mess. And I mean, we all know that after the success of Palworld, it was only a matter of time before they started licensing their IP. In fact, they already started by announcing Palworld Mobile with the company that made PUBG, Krafton. And now it's happening again with Palworld Online. Palworld Online is a new mobile MMO being developed and published by Garena. In the official announcement, Garena's president acknowledged that Palworld became a hugely recognizable IP. So now the company believes there is an opportunity here to take the essence of the original game and bring it to mobile, but this time in a shape of an MMO. We still don't know a lot about this game, but the basic idea sounds extremely ambitious and also somewhat generic. Palworld Online will apparently feature an open world filled with large interconnected systems, hidden treasures, different challenges, lore, and of course plenty of pals to collect. According to the official announcement, the game will also include co-op progression along with both PvP and PvE elements. And of course, it wouldn't be Palworld without survival mechanics, crafting, accessibility features, and apparently even optional one-tap controls designed specifically for mobile players. And I mean, none of this is new, right, for an MMO project. The only differentiator is that it has Palworld name attached to it. And of course it makes sense that Pocket Pair would license its biggest IP for a project like this with this particular developer. Garena has a ton of experience when it comes to mobile projects. That includes Arena of Valor and Free Fire, probably two of their biggest hits. So with that, Pocket Pair gets to put the Palworld brand in front of an even larger audience without having to do all of the development and live service work itself. And it gets paid in the process. From a business perspective, what's not to love, right? Well, there is only one slightly awkward question I have. Remember me mentioning Palworld Mobile a few minutes earlier? This is for me is the confusing part. I mean, why does Pocket Pair needs two mobile projects based on what appears to be the same core gameplay and the same IP? Now, of course, Palworld isn't technically an MMO itself. It's a mix of survival and creature collection kind of thing, but it's not that far away. The differences between an MMO project and multiplayer survival is not very huge. That means that both Krafton and Garena might end up competing for the very same audience. And if both games are called Palworld, how do you make them feel distinct enough that players understand why they should exist separately? Personally, I think this is going to be a very difficult situation for Pocket Pair to manage. Of course, expanding the brand can be a very good thing. It can bring new players into the main Palworld game, expose the franchise to different markets, and help Pocket Pair diversify its revenue. But licensing the same thing to two different companies, I mean, it also comes with a risk. If Pocket Pair is not directly involved and does not enforce any sort of standards, it could end up attaching Palworld name to two subpar projects. And even if they didn't develop those projects directly, players will still associate the quality of those games with the Palworld itself. So again, this could become a great example of smart expansion, or it could become a lesson in what happens when a successful IP grows too quickly. Pocket Pair needs to be extremely careful with how both licensing agreements progress. But what do you think? Would you actually play a Palworld MMO? Meanwhile, for the first time since 1990, EA is once again a privately owned company. A huge $55 billion deal has changed who controls Electronic Arts once and for all, and it may also change what kinds of games EA is willing to make. Following the announcement from last year, the deal officially closed on August 4th, and EA is now being controlled by Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners, and the transaction was definitely not cheap. EA CEO Andrew Wilson was obviously extremely enthusiastic about the whole thing, and he shared as much in the official press release. He described the deal as a beginning of a brand new chapter for the company. According to Wilson, EA's new partners share its vision and ambition, which will allow the company to invest boldly, accelerate innovation, and build the next generation of games and experiences. He said those experiences would serve the hundreds of millions of players and fans who inspire EA every day. Wilson also talked about continuing to create exciting stories, reaching new audiences, and of course using AI to improve game development and player experiences. And phew, that's a lot of smoke. I mean, all of these things are fantastic, especially in the press release, but again, it's all just words. The real question is how this deal is going to affect EA's current and future games. And my personal prediction is that we're going to see fewer EA games going forward, not more. And here is why. On the positive side of things, EA no longer has public shareholders, so the company doesn't have to stand in front of the public market every quarter and defend its latest earnings. But that doesn't mean the financial pressure has disappeared. It simply changed. EA now has the next best thing: owners and lenders who helped finance the acquisition. And those lenders, well, they have a $20 billion debt commitment from the company, which means that EA will have to work that much harder to service that debt and also to generate reliable financial returns for all the other people who were involved in this transaction. And when the company desperately needs cash flow, proven franchises become much more attractive than any kinds of experiments. Of course, it doesn't mean that the company suddenly pulls back from AAA game development. I mean, EA could still support long development cycles for selected projects. Select being, of course, the operative word. It is much more likely to focus its biggest investments on franchises that have already demonstrated clear commercial value. Why take an enormous gamble on something else when EA Sports, Battlefield, and Apex Legends could provide predictable results? So, if you're a fan of those franchises, this could actually be good news, as they're clearly not going anywhere. But if you're waiting on something from one of EA's more niche franchises, I wouldn't get too excited. If you're a fan of Dragon Age, Need for Speed, or Command & Conquer, I would not expect a flood of excitement new announcements anytime soon. Of course, that doesn't mean that those franchises are officially dead, but under this new ownership structure, my guess is that EA will become even more selective about where it takes risks. And speaking of risks and gambles that didn't pan out, let's talk about Last Sentinel. 6 years of development, hundreds of millions of dollars, and one terrible round of closed-door playtests may have just killed Tencent's supposed answer to GTA. If you haven't heard about it, Last Sentinel was announced back in 2023 as a debut AAA open-world game from Lightspeed LA. The game was set in a futuristic version of Tokyo with Troy Baker attached to the project, and the announcement quickly attracted a lot of attention. Some people were even suggesting that Last Sentinel could finally become a game capable of competing with GTA, but apparently that was not meant to be. Bloomberg recently published a big report of what's actually been happening inside Lightspeed. According to this report, the latest playtest round went very badly. Tencent executives were really unhappy about the state of the game. According to them, it did not feel anything like a Rockstar title. It was described as janky, and it reportedly failed to reach the quality bar the publisher expected. And after looking at the game's condition and comparing it with the competition it would face from GTA 6 and other AAA games, Tencent reportedly decided to pull the plug. Now, to be clear, the cancellation has not officially been announced yet, but by some accounts, Lightspeed's leadership is already telling employees that Tencent is no longer moving forward with the project. And at least 68 employees have also reportedly been laid off. And while I'm genuinely sad that another ambitious project bites the dust, I honestly don't find this outcome that much shocking. And first of all, I understand why every studio wants to aim high. You have to do it, right? I mean, everybody wants to be the next GTA, the next Baldur's Gate, the next Expedition 33. But at some point, you also have to be realistic. Trying to compete with Rockstar's level of open world experience and production quality on your very first project, no less, is like trying to climb Mount Everest after attending one corporate rock climbing event. Ambition is good, but ambition without realistic planning can destroy a project. And that brings us to the second problem. I mean, how did it take 6 years for both developers and the publisher to realize what state the game was in? What exactly was happening during those years? How did the project move into full production without the core concepts being properly validated? If the game was genuinely in such a bad shape, those problems should have been identified much earlier. I mean, based on my experience making games, almost every month, if not more frequently. There is a check-in with all internal stakeholders, or at least most of them. Internal builds being shared, feedback session, playtests, all that stuff. And there is also a bunch of red tape that you need to pass for every major design decision. Were they even doing that? I mean, honestly, developers should have been able to adjust direction or rethink what the project was trying to be after those sessions, or during them, as I'm sure they had them, or at least something similar. Instead, the report makes it sound as though Tencent spent years signing checks, while Lightspeed continued working without proving that the basic game could meet expectations. So if this report is accurate, it's not only a creative failure, it's also a huge management oversight on both sides. And when I hear stuff like that, I think about how this industry continues to amaze me. I mean, some projects get millions and millions of dollars in funding without demonstrating a convincing proof of concept. Meanwhile, games that have already shown clear commercial potential, even games using a similar futuristic setting, such as Deus Ex for example, they are slowly being forgotten. Maybe I'm missing something, but I do not think that this is fair. And Last Sentinel appears to show what can happen when a publisher makes one enormous original bet and discovers the problems far too late. And that brings us to Xbox. The dust has now somewhat settled after the biggest reset in the company's history. So, what's next? According to Xbox CEO Ashish Sharma, the company has several very ambitious goals and some very big priorities. An internal memo was obtained by The Verge recently, saying that Xbox's new big objective is return Xbox to players, whatever that means. And of course, Xbox also wants to grow their revenue, obviously. Sharma's strategy is built around four main pillars. First, strengthen the platform led by console, grow their games into global franchises, make Minecraft the world's leading creator platform, and extend the worlds that fans already love, which is a lot of corporate executive language in one memo. Strengthen the platform, extend the worlds, return Xbox to the player. I mean, those are just great, but they don't tell us anything. I mean, with the exception of Minecraft, of course. So if you strip away all this corporate language, the idea is simple. Xbox wants to double down on its biggest franchises. And from a financial perspective, that makes sense. Sharma also recently mentioned that 3 big franchises at Xbox generate more than $1 billion in annual revenue. Of course, she conveniently didn't say which ones, but again, speculating, she might be talking about Candy Crush, Minecraft, and Call of Duty. But this strategy comes with its own problems. Prioritizing familiar franchises does not eliminate risk, it simply moves the risk elsewhere. We all know that even the biggest and most recognizable gaming franchises can still fail, and a well-known name does not automatically guarantee that players will like the next game. And of course, it does not guarantee any commercial success. From the development perspective though, there are some advantages. For example, controlling the costs more effectively, sharing technology between different teams and different projects, coordinating marketing campaigns, and reusing tools, assets, all that. But quantity does not mean quality. And if we're talking about Call of Duty, Minecraft, Candy Crush, and other biggest Xbox franchises, I'm also wondering how much further realistically can they really grow? I mean, they are already just enormous right now. So at least some of them might be already close to their natural revenue ceiling. Of course, that's only my interpretation, but it raises the most important question behind Xbox's entire strategy. Can these games continue growing? And also, if every resource goes toward expanding the things that already work, where does the next big thing come from? And those are very serious questions for Xbox to answer right now. And while we're on the subject of Xbox and its biggest franchises, the company recently launched a brand new Halo game across all major platforms, including PlayStation. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be going so well. Of course, I'm talking about Halo Campaign Evolved that was launched on July 28 on PC, Xbox, and for the first time ever on PlayStation 5, and it was also available through Game Pass on day one. But roughly a month after its original release, Insider Gaming reported that at least several employees of Halo Studios are being laid off. So far, we know that the studio lost one game producer, a scrum master, a software engineer, and several contractors. And naturally, everybody is wondering whether those departures have something to do with the game's initial performance. And so far, it's really hard to say since we don't have any official sales figures. But I am a little bit of a detective, so I managed to find at least some data. For example, if we look at Steam numbers, the game reached a concurrent player peak of only 25,000 players. I mean, a little over 25,000. But that is significantly lower than the Master Chief Collection. And I'm not even talking about free-to-play Halo Infinite. And the reviews are not encouraging either. Right now, the game is sitting at mixed reviews, with players criticizing almost every aspect of the game. Some are unhappy about the required account linking, others have complained about needing an online connection to play, and there have also been reports of numerous bugs or feature designs. But the general consensus seems to be that the game is not different enough from the version already available through the Master Chief Collection. Now, all that aside, we do know that Xbox is not done with the restructuring, so people who are leaving Halo Studios might be part of that, rather than it being a direct response to campaign evolved performance. Unfortunately, without more information, we just don't know for certain. Also, Steam's concurrent player numbers represent only one part of a multi-platform release. And to add to that, we have also seen enough of this industry to understand that a game does not necessarily need to fail for its developers to lose their jobs. Unfortunately. Even when the game becomes a smash hit, the people who made it can still be laid off because of, restructuring, changing priorities, cost reductions, or, well, reasons. And that's the bottom line here. Even if you're working on one of the biggest and most recognizable franchises in gaming, you are never completely safe at Xbox. And that's all I have for you guys so far. Publishers want more control, larger audiences, and more predictable revenue. But when those plans don't work, players and developers are often the ones dealing with the consequences. But hey, let me know what do you think about all that. And with that, Alex is signing off for today. Cheers!